Hello guys, my name is Clay, and in today's tutorial video, we're going to be going over everything that Fina can do with categories. So categories are what you use to classify your transactions and to bucket them into the proper areas so that when you go to do your reporting, you can actually get data that makes sense and that is useful to you. And so today we're going to talk about what categories are, how to use them, how to set them up. We're going to talk about the three different types of categories between income, expenses, and transfers. We're going to talk about groups versus categories. We'll go over cross-referencing your transactions. We'll go over AI classifications. We'll go over snapshots, which is basically a way to save your current state of Fina or your category list. And then we'll also go over how to actually share your custom category schema with another user or with a different profile. So we're going to dive in, and again, I'm going to share with you guys everything that we can do here with categories. But when you first sign into Fina, as always, there's two main concepts. There's your profiles and your pages. Profiles is where you connect and clean all of your financial data. So as you can see here, we have a bunch of accounts linked up, and your pages are where you actually do the reporting side of things. So inside of your profile, you'll see these tabs at the top. You'll see accounts, transactions, categories, and rules. As always, this is the first step would be connecting your accounts. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that you guys have already done this. We have other videos on these different steps that you guys can see on our resources page. So I'll just quickly click through and show you the tabs. Obviously, here is the transactions page. As you can see, we're pulling in transactions across all of your different accounts. And on these different transactions, each transaction has a category assigned to it. So these categories can be classified by AI. They're going to be basically, that means they're going to be categorized out of the box for you, or you can change that category to whatever other category you want. So this one says groceries right now. If I change this to restaurants, I could create a rule that says anytime the name is HEB or the merchant is HEB, save that and apply it to all the transactions that are similar to this. So that's just a quick little tip on the actual categories themselves. But I'm going to show you guys in today's video how to actually set up your list of categories and all the different features that you can do related to these categories. So if I click on the categories tab, if you come here, you guys will notice you have your entire list of all your different categories. So the very first thing I want to talk about when it comes to categories is we have three main sections. We have expenses, we have income, and we have transfers. The reason that we split these sections up into these distinct areas is what we call them, is because your expense categories will make a transaction a negative value. Your income categories are for transactions that are of a positive value. And then your transfer categories actually will be omitted from your reporting. So for example, we do this very deliberately because if you have a credit card linked up and a primary bank account linked up, and you pay off your credit card with your primary bank account, and these are both linked up within Fina, it would double count your expenses if that credit card payment wasn't marked as a transfer. And so we mark things like credit card payments as transfers because we don't want to double count the expenses. So I did want to point that out, and I can give a further example on that in the future. But that's the reason essentially that we split things up between income, expenses, and transfers, and it makes things a lot easier and smoother for the reporting side later on. So when it comes to categories, you can create as many categories as you would like within Fina. One of the main concepts is we have the concept of groups versus categories. So as you can see here, I have this group called food and drink. This is an expense group, and you'll see that I have two categories within the food and drink section. So I have groceries and I have restaurants and other. So what this means is, as you can see for food and drink, this just rolls up these two categories and shows me the total amount. So it looks like I have spent in the current month $216 on both groceries and restaurants and other. And one cool quick side note that you can do within Fina is if I just click on this groceries tab right here, I can actually quickly cross-reference the transactions that have happened in the current month that are equal to groceries, just so I can make sure that all of these do look correct. These are actually valid transactions for this. So a lot of people like to be able to just quickly cross-reference these things, and we do allow that from within the categories page. So as you're going and you're creating your category schema here, a lot of people will start with our default category list that we provide you out of the box. But there's also a lot of other people within Fina who will actually create their own category schema completely from scratch. So if you come over here to the right side, you can click factory reset, which will reset all of your categories to the default settings that we give you out of the box, which again is going to be very similar to the list that you're seeing here. You could also erase all of the categories and start totally from scratch. And you can also do a few other interesting things here, which I'll show in just a minute. But to quickly go back and touch on the groups versus categories, the reason I'm bringing this up is because inside of Fina, every transaction can only be mapped one-to-one with one category. So you can't actually tag a transaction as food and drink. You would need to tag a transaction as either groceries or restaurants and other. Food and drink is simply the category name that we're going to roll those two categories up underneath. So again, for all intents and purposes, when you're actually going through your transaction categorization process, you're not going to see something that says food and drink. You're only going to see groceries or restaurants and other. And you'll notice that it says food and drink underneath it if it is assigned to a specific group. So the groups are more so for reporting purposes and for the benefit of being able to roll up categories into one area. I will make a quick side note here and say that right now, again, transactions can only be mapped one-to-one to a category. However, in the future, we are exploring adding a concept called tags, which would allow multi-dimensional tagging on transactions, but that's a side concept, and essentially we would still always maintain one category being mapped to one transaction. The only exception to this rule is if I open this transaction, for example, and I decide to split a transaction, meaning I want to assign half of the transaction to one category and half of the transaction to another category. That would be the only exception to this rule. So the next thing I want to go over is how we actually do the classification on the AI side of things for auto categorizing your transactions as they come in. If you're just getting started with Fina and you sign up and you have one profile and you're using the default list of categories, this is going to be super easy because we're going to already have everything mapped for you in terms of the AI classifications. But if you're somebody who really is into the customization side of things and you're going to erase the entire category list and start from scratch, you will want to understand how the AI classification works and why this is important. So I'm going to actually go over to a new profile. Let me just create a new profile from scratch. And I'm going to come in here. Again, we don't have any accounts linked up in this case, but I'm going to go over to the categories tab. And as you can see here, this is the default category schema. We already have these AI classifications made, but I'm going to go ahead and click erase all and start this from scratch. Okay, so as you can see here, we have expenses, income, and transfers as normal. I'm going to create a category called groceries. And as always, you can always change the emoji here. So I'm going to do, let's see here. Let's just do some sort of food. I'll just do this little soup here for groceries. So as you can see, these AI classifications are blank. So now that I have this category called groceries, any transactions that come in are actually going to be unmapped because we don't have any AI classifications set up out of the box because we're starting completely from scratch here. So none of my transactions that come in will all be given a category called uncategorized, essentially. But if I take this category right here called groceries and I click this AI classification button, I can actually map this category called groceries to these particular AI classifications that we have in our backend. So for example, if I take, let me see here. Let's say I have groceries. Here we go. There's one called groceries specifically. I'm going to take the one called groceries in this case and map it to groceries. That's pretty simple, pretty easy to do. But maybe I have another one that I just want to call food. I'll do food, and then groceries has already been mapped, so I can't use that one. But I'm going to use restaurants and other, and that's going to be under this food category. So now I have two categories. I have one called groceries, one called food, and restaurants and other is mapped to food, groceries is mapped to groceries. Now anytime I bring in transactions that are related to groceries and or food, there's a high percentage chance that they'll be classified automatically as groceries or food because we've given them that classification out of the box. So you can create these classifications and map them to our pre-existing schema that we have here, meaning that you can create your own category schema from scratch and still have out of the box categorizations that will work. So that is one way of doing things. I'm going to switch back over to my other profile and share with you guys how rules work, because rules are a different concept, but are very closely related to this classifications concept. So for example, if I go back over to my transactions here, the one that I have called HEB, this is a grocery store in Texas. This grocery store is being auto-categorized as groceries because we have that AI classification called groceries that is being mapped to our groceries category. So out of the box, this is coming in correctly as groceries. But sometimes these transactions are incorrectly mapped. So for example, maybe Starbucks is being classified as something incorrect. Maybe for whatever reason it came in and it said subscriptions. And I'm like, I don't want Starbucks to be subscriptions. I'd rather Starbucks be restaurants and other. And so I can simply change the category on my own. That's the entire point of being able to change the categorizations and map things appropriately. But once I do change this, if I wanted to make that a rule, I could always create a rule on top of Starbucks that says anytime the name is Starbucks or the merchant is Starbucks, then set that category to restaurants and other and apply that. So I just wanted to point that out, that rules essentially will override everything else. So if I come over here to the rules tab, I can see an entire list of all of my rules with their current priorities. And essentially these rules are going to be the precedent over everything. These AI classifications are there to help you auto-categorize things out of the box. And in my estimation, I would say things are around anywhere from 50 to 80% accurate in terms of where you're shopping, where you're going, how common these transactions are for other people. And these will only get better over time. But the way to be nearly 95, 98, 99% accurate is to set your own rules on your transactions as you're categorizing them. So I did want to point that out. That is the difference between rules and AI classifications. The other things that you can see here in the categories page is you have the ability to change this date range filter. So if I click on current year, for example, it's going to change the amount of money that I spent on all these categories. And I just use this as, again, a quick reference to check and see if all of these things are appropriately categorized. So I can just do a quick cross-reference here and make sure things look correct. The other actions I have here is I can convert categories to a group. I can delete a category. I can remap the AI classification. So all basic stuff based on what we've gone over so far. The last concept that I do want to touch on here today is related to sharing and or saving your category list. So before you go and make any big changes on your list of categories, especially if you've already mapped or categorized a lot of transactions within your profile, I would always recommend taking a snapshot. So if I click this Manage Snapshots button, a snapshot is essentially a way to save the current state of all of your categories and rules within your Fina profile. So for example, if you do take a snapshot, let's take one right now. I'll go ahead and click yes. Fina will save all the categories and rules in the current profile as a new snapshot. Do you want to continue? Click save. Snapshot has been successfully saved. This is awesome because if now I decide to go and change all my category schema and make a bunch of switches on my profile, and then ultimately I don't like the changes that I made, I can always revert back to this point in time in the future. So it's a good way to just save your work and make sure that you don't have to go back and redo a bunch of things. Now, the last concept I'm going to talk about here today is actually sharing your list of categories. So one really, really cool feature that we have in Fina is that you can actually steal someone else's entire list of categories and the way that they've mapped things, or you can share that with other people, or you can even share it with a new profile that you have within your account. So if I click on this little ID down here at the bottom, I actually already shared this. So let me go to a different profile. Let's go to this test profile. So inside this test profile, I have an entirely different set of categories that I was mapping for an example for a client here. So if I click on, it looks like I already shared this one as well. So let's go to this one. Okay, categories. Okay, so I want to click the share categories button, and it looks like I can share all the categories and rules from this profile to other people. So I'm going to click share. And then if I open this up, I can actually copy this code and I can publicly share this list of categories with somebody else. So it's really cool because someone else can just simply copy this ID and import it into their own account. So if I show you guys real quick, let me go to this business category list. Here's a bunch of business categories. I'm actually going to copy this ID right here. Go to this new profile, go to my category side of things, and I will import categories from somewhere else. I can import directly from another list of my profiles, or I can import from somebody external that's given an ID. I can also decide if I want to include the rules that they've created or exclude the rules that they've created. In this case, I don't have any rules, so I'm just going to include the categories, and I'll go ahead and click Snapshot. So voila, just like that, I've imported an entire list of business categories that have all the AI classifications already made. I don't have to do the work in setting up this entire schema myself, and I can get right ahead started with categorizing my transactions. So hopefully this video has helped you guys understand all of the different possibilities with categories, the ability to share these with other people, and gives you guys an entire overview on how to set up your own category schema and classify your transactions. If you guys have any questions, as always, please reach out to us, and we'll see you guys in the next video.